Hi everyone, welcome to day 15 of Spellbinder's Crafty Advent Calendar. Today's Crafty surprise is an embossing folder with a really cool interlocking rings design. The folder will emboss 2 long rows of rings at once. I have a little trick to show you how to get a complete panel design. My wrist is a little sore, so I'll be working with my electric embossing machine today. I'm starting off with a panel that is 4¼ inches by 5½ inches. The panel is lined up with the edge of the design, not the folder. And I'm using just a little bit of Post-it note tape to hold the folder in place and then run it through my die cutting machine. And there we have it, a nice crisp design, and we're going to do this 2 more times. Again, I'm lining up the design on the folder right up against the design of the last embossed row of rings. And so nothing will slip. I use that Post-it note, which I have handily stuck on my hand around the end of the folder. To avoid any pressure on the area that is already embossed, it will hang off the edge of the embossing plates. When I line this overhanging area, I'm also making sure that the edge of the embossing folder without the design is also hanging off of the plates. If this is not done and the embossing folder is simply lined up with the edge of the plates, the previously embossed area, just a strip of it, will be flattened out. Okay, so the third embossing. Again, I line up the design on the folder with the design on the last embossed area. The embossing folder is placed between the plates. Both the embossed area and the folder's edge without the design will overhang the plates. So I make sure that both the top and the bottom plate are even, but lined up right along the edge of the design on the embossing folder. And for some reason, if I feed the plates through paper first, the machine is not engaging, so I flipped it around. And there you have it. The panel is perfectly embossed, just as if it had been embossed with a folder that was full size. The colors of these backgrounds are a little unusual for Christmas cards, but some gold embossing will set that right. I'm trying to apply the Versamark ink as much as possible just to the raised area of the design. The ink pad is tapped on ever so lightly, and after the embossing powder is melted, I'm going to apply ink a second time. Again, I lightly tap the embossing folder onto the panel. It takes absolutely no pressure to transfer the ink. The second coating of embossing powder will make sure that there's no patchiness of the embossing on the panel. And then I go ahead and apply the heat and melt it. And I follow the same procedure to do the pink panel, applying the ink lightly 2 times, coating it each time with embossing powder and melting it. It won't be perfect, and a little bit of embossing will sit in the debossed areas, but I think it just adds to the overall effect. There's not so much that it detracts from the overall interlocking ring design. Between the dry embossing and the heat embossing, the panels are definitely a little warped. The panel is now trimmed down to 4 by 5¼ inches, and when I apply glue on the back, I put on a fairly good amount, but in thin streams, and it is being adhered to a gold foil panel that measures slightly larger. And before I continue, I'll pop the panel under some weight for about 10 or 15 minutes so that it dries completely flat. Both of these cards are going to be decorated with a couple of die sets from the Stitchmas Advent Calendar. The one that I'm working on now is Joy from day 8, and I'll also be using Noel from day 4. For both die sets, the detail die was centered in the outline die and used to cut gold foil cardstock. White sheet foam was die cut with the outline die alone, and then the gold foil die cut was adhered on top. The ornament detail for both images was coordinated with the color of cardstock used on the background. And while I was doing this, my two panels were sitting under some weight. They're nice and flat, and they can be adhered to A2 size card bases. And the Noel and Joy images are centered on the panels, one of which is in portrait orientation and the other landscape. And rather than stitching, I elected to cover the little stitching holes with some beautiful gold crystals. The top of the ornament in the images was finished off with holly and berries from the Christmas Wonder die set. And that completes day 15 of Spellbinder's Crafty Advent Calendar. Stay tuned for day 16. It's a fun one. As always, I appreciate your visit.